Welcome to Nuanced Beauty. This podcast is intended to be a spot where my husband Bill and I will capture some complex thoughts and challenge us to hold to our opinions loosely so that we can see the beauty in others and the beauty in ourselves. I want to challenge us to dive deeper into those everyday topics and those sticky topics that we might shy away from, or we might bulldoze over others with our opinions. Because I think there's wisdom in this idea that if we all thought exactly the same, there would be no need for anyone else. So let's have a conversation and let's get nuanced. Hi guys, welcome back to Nuanced Beauty. Today I have another interview. Hi Michelle.
Hi, Christina.
Thank you so much for being with me today. Michelle and I and Bill connected via CrossFit years and years ago. And then she got into real estate. And Michelle was our realtor for the home that we sold in Seattle. And we have kept in touch. And whenever we have like random house questions about like what would be the best like renovation or such, she is our go-to person. She is super passionate about real estate. And yeah, we just love chatting with her, all things house related things. And so yeah, I want to take a moment to thank you. It's been wonderful working with you, and I'm so glad that you were willing to come on the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful to get to speak with you again.
So I was kind of reflecting back, and we did an episode about when and where to buy a house. And of course, for anyone who's listened for any length of time, we are not experts on anything, and we just kind of talk about our experiences, and we get into the nuance of all the thoughts we had. And I thought it would be valuable to bring someone on to kind of focus on the how to buy a home, and more specifically, how to find a realtor. Um, and so, Michelle, thank you for being able to give us insights on this. And I thought maybe we could start by digging into the question, what are the top priorities that you see clients having? And are there any overlooked priorities that you wish that they would elevate more?
That's a great question. I think typically when I meet with someone, specifically a buyer that is looking to buy their home or their first home, initially what they will tell me is maybe an area that they're looking for and maybe the number of bedrooms or bathrooms that they're, looking for.
Desiring.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And what I end up doing is I ask a lot of questions because what I want is I want to ensure that this home can fit their needs and desires for as long as possible. Now, clearly, when somebody is getting a home, there's always going to be a concession, maybe a desire that they didn't get. But I want to make sure that all the needs have been met to the best of the ability within the constraints and the budget. So,
Mhm.
example, people will tell me they want 2, maybe 3 bedrooms. But I find that I ask a lot of things like, what are their passions and hobbies outside of work? Because if I find out that they have something that requires a lot of storage, and we don't find out till quite a ways into the home buying process, that can make for a lot of frustration for them. So if they have a 17-foot
Mm.
deck, they need to be able to store that.
Yes.
And I want them to have that. So those are some of the things that I think about is what is their current lifestyle like and what will their future lifestyle be like? What do they want to do in the future?
Uh-huh. I feel like I remember us having a conversation in regards to yards. That same kind of thing where it's like somebody either wants a yard or they really don't want a yard or they don't think about the maintenance of a yard.
Right.
Right? That's probably another good example where it's like, oh, how does that play into the equation?
Absolutely. So we've all been trained that the standard, bread and butter house that we're supposed to desire is a standalone home with a fenced-in yard. And when people who are maybe renting an apartment are looking for a home for the first time, um, that's something I talk to them about. Do you enjoy yard work? Do you enjoy landscaping? Do you enjoy pulling weeds? Some people do. They find it therapeutic. Some people did it, as a kid and enjoy it, and some people don't. And so maybe a more modestly sized yard would still serve the purpose of, if it's wanting to have friends gather for a barbecue,
Mm-hmm.
small play space. One couple, they have a very small piece of land, but they're directly across the street from a park. So
Oh,
for them,
okay.
it works out perfectly. They
Like an
get
extension of their home. Yeah.
Exactly. They get to have barbecues with their friends, but they don't have to change their lifestyle and change their hobbies to also get that, like you said, extension of their home.
Uh-huh. Have you noticed any like major differences between a first-time home buyer and someone who's buying their second or third or fourth home? Like, have you noticed like a major difference in priorities or even like I'm thinking emotionally? I feel like when we bought our second home, we weren't as, I don't know, like crazy
Yeah,
because we'd been through it.
that's a really good question, and I think there is a difference, and I specialize with first time home buyers, and it's actually why I got into real estate because I remember how nervous I was, and I didn't have a lot of guidance, and my dad owned a condo, so I didn't have as much of experience with an actual house, and so
Uh-huh.
with a first time buyer, there's a few different things. They're really nervous. Um,
Uh-huh.
and when they are looking at an inspection report, they sometimes feel like the house has to be perfect. And, with a second or third first time home buyer, or excuse me, a second or third home buyer, they are
Uh-huh.
looking
Have
at,
been through it.
yeah, they've been through it. They understand that no home is perfect. Even new construction may have flaws, but
Right.
they have a little bit more breathing room because typically they've gained equity from their first home. And so
Uh-huh.
they have a little more cushion where they think something like, oh, it's got an older furnace, so we know that we'll save up and we can expect, a rough estimated amount of lifetime left for a major system, and we can
Hmm.
during that time and be ready for that. I kind of remind people it's a little bit like buying a used car in that we are looking for like a solid working system, but something like tires might be like a roof. You don't replace them every day. Once in a blue moon, you have to replace them, and they have an expected life expectancy. So just kind of that education process for those first time home buyers.
That makes sense. Like you're trying to get them to think long haul, like long-term perspective, but it's like it's such an expense. And so
Yeah.
like you're jumping into this huge loan or mortgage, right? And it's like, oh, this is my home and like I want it to be so great. And like, yeah, I can think back to our first home and it's interesting. I feel like Bill was he was kind of like, this will meet all our needs. Yep, this is good. And for me, our house was like in Seattle and it was like built in 1959. And the electrical upstairs was two-prong outlets. And it was, for me, it was this like huge mental sticking point for a hot minute. Like, oh my gosh, is that safe? And so I feel like for us, we're thinking back to first time home buying, we had this you blow things out of perspective because you just don't know what you're jumping into. And
Yeah,
then there's other things that maybe like um you really should pay attention to and really should be prioritized like highly.
right.
Like that's a red flag.
Right. And I remember that feeling too of my first home. I felt like, oh my goodness, how much is a washer and dryer? Because I had been a renter and
Hmm.
never had to think about the cost of replacing a washer or dryer, right? And now it's like, okay, how old do we think these appliances are? They're estimated to last X amount of years, so maybe they still have half their lifespan left, something like that.
Yeah.
So it really becomes, for a second or third time home buyer, it's just a mathematical equation. Does it have the other items they need, whether location or space or layout?
Mm-hmm.
Where with the first time buyer, it's kind of helping them uh, evaluate their priorities. I think that's the thing. When you're a first time buyer, you're still evaluating how to rank order your priorities.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of curious, have you ran into any like red flags? Like where you've kind of had to talk a client out of a purchase? And it's
Oh,
okay if you haven't, but I'm
yeah.
curious if you'd be willing to share.
Oh, I sure have. And it's not that I'm okay. Honestly, a couple times I did feel like I was trying to talk them out of it, but it's really about presenting the information, and
Uh-huh.
then and at the end of the day, I don't feel like I'm making the decision. What my goal is to provide as,
Understand the magnitude, maybe?
yeah, I'm just trying to provide enough education so that the buyer can make the decision. So,
Uh-huh.
and again, this is a very like a common nuance between experienced home buyers and first time buyers. So,
Mm-hmm.
there have been homes where the um, basement really, it seemed like it was not watertight. And being
Oh
an
gosh.
realtor in the Pacific Northwest, uh, the 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 amount of rain we get is so it's something. Mold and moisture is a real situation. So for somebody that's looking at maybe an unfinished basement and they think like, oh, I'm going to make this a finished living space, and I'm
Yes.
expanding, you really want to look at a major system overhaul to ensure that that space will be watertight, whether it's a French drain system or a sump pump. But there's different things that people can do. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people get distracted by the cosmetic of that property. Or I had another buyer that really loved to work in the garage on cars. That was his passion, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
expensive car parts. And the garage was almost partly subterranean. The driveway sloped down and there was no drainage in front of the garage.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you're like,
those
"Ah,
are
are you
concerns
sure
for,
you want that?"
yeah, so those are things where it's like I know that the house seems remodeled, the kitchen has, pretty tile, but there's
Nice kitchen, nice bathroom.
right.
Yeah.
But the concern is that maybe they did some cosmetic upgrades without, upgrading the supporting system like plumbing
Uh-huh.
or drainage. So
Uh-huh.
that's a common one.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that, I mean, it's interesting, like we're out here in Northeast Florida, and we're in an area where all the homes are new. Like so it's just different. And whereas like being in the Northwest, like you're buying fixer uppers and you're investing money into them, and it feels so different. Like I've chatted with a couple people and I've mentioned that our first home was like built in 1959, and I can legit see like almost like they're breaking out in hives because they're thinking like, how is it possible that a home is still existing from that time when we have these like brand new or like only 10-year-old or 5-year-old homes?
And that goes with each region. So one of the things I can say about the home that you lived in, because it had been there for over 50, 70 years,
Hmm.
we know that it withstood major storms. It has already withstood like a earthquake that was over 6.0.
Uh-huh.
We know that has withstood, and the foundation didn't settle. You didn't have sloping floors.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, like the foundation is definitely not moving.
And
uh
sometimes with new construction, sometimes the ground hasn't settled yet from when it was.
right. Yeah, and I'm seeing like I actually just recently, our home is like 7 or 8 years, and I'm in touch because we have a window leaking on the front of the house. And what's annoying is the it sounds like I'm in touch with the manufacturer of the window, and I will potentially get a free window, but I'm going to have to pay for someone to come out and install it. which is just it's annoying. Like, but it's maintenance. But the various things for a new home, like I can call the home builder and chat with them about like well, it looks like the windows have a 10-year manufacturing warranty, like your foundation has like a 10-year blah blah blah, like those sorts of things. So it just feels like different concerns that I have to like think through.
Right.
Let's switch gears and kind of jump into specifically how to pick a realtor and like given just some of these priorities that we've talked about for someone who is maybe jumping into the not job market, the house market soon, are there good questions that I should ask when interviewing a realtor? And are there like based, can you kind of guide us through like what you would expect the answer to be and like what that would tell us about the realtor?
Yeah, so some questions that I would ask a realtor is, um, you know, have they worked with, if you're a buyer, have they worked with buyers? How recently have they worked with buyers, and where did that buyer end up purchasing in? That will help kind of guide, is the person familiar with the area? Um, and then the other question I would ask is if they're cross-trained. So for example, it's great to work with someone that works with buyers and specializes in it. But at the same time, I became a much better negotiator after I had done my first listing for a seller. Things really changed because I really understood the perspective of a seller and what they're looking for. And it really
Uh-huh.
enhanced my negotiation.
So
Um,
by cross-trained, you're specifically like the word cross-trained, you're meaning like you know both how to work with a buyer and a seller. Is that
Absolutely. I think
okay?
that is really, I think that that has really changed, it really fast tracked me to become an even better agent when I am working on the buyer side.
Mm-hmm.
So that cross training of buyer and seller. Um, and then also for me, I know my limitations where I am uh, great at residential, but I although technically could work in commercial, I refer out for commercial because I feel like nobody can be an expert at everything.
And
Um,
by commercial, what do you like?
so
Do you mean
somebody,
retail space?
yeah, so somebody might be looking for a business for real
Ah,
estate, and
okay.
so that is like outside of my realm because I just feel that I would at this point spread myself too thin.
Okay.
And so I would want to work with another agent on that. So just knowing where that agent's limitations are, because they should know. They should know what they are good at and what they aren't. uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then the big thing is experienced in the area that you wish to purchase in and understands your needs and desires and ask really thoughtful questions.
So would
So
that be where you're like, how many homes did you close last year? Like, would it that be that sort of question?
absolutely, I think that's a very valid question to ask how many transactions that they helped close in the last year, how many were buyers, how many were sellers. That will tell you how active they are in the current market. Some of the things my clients and I have bumped up against is an agent that might be doing this job part time and isn't keeping up with all of the changes that continue to come out, especially during the pandemic. Things were changing every few
Mm-hmm.
weeks. Um, and then how many of those transactions in the last year are in an area that you're considering. Um, Technically, a buyer is to do their own due diligence, but it's really helpful if you have a seller that is experienced in in that area. So for example, areas that might not be connected to sewer and they might have a septic system, or they might not be on public water, they may be on a private well system or a community well system, and just kind of understanding um, what they're looking for and what kind of reports would be helpful for a buyer to evaluate. Or
Okay.
if a buyer has a dream of um, I want to, have an in-ground swimming pool. Some areas like where I live in the city of Renton, it's got a very high water table. So, an agent in that area will know, hey, you really want to check with the city and permitting to see if that's even a possibility before you enter into contract with this.
Oh, like the possibility for permitting down the road. Is that what you're getting at?
Right. And it's up to the buyer to do their due diligence, but it's always nice to have an agent that can help point in, different areas.
Gather that info. Yeah, yeah.
So I think those are really good, um, things that people should look for in a realtor. And I think the type of questions they ask are important. You know, like somebody may be purchasing a home, but some of the questions I ask are, um, is there any mobility or limitations for either anybody in your household or somebody that may come visit frequently? Is
Oh,
there
okay.
is there a cultural aspect that we need to consider? Some people have traditions, and it's great to know that up front to help, streamline their process.
Uh-huh.
Um, just future needs. Are they considering, expanding their family, and is that something that they need to consider in the next 5 to 7 years?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, that's good. Like I feel like that kind of goes back to the like helping the buyer think like long term, but not necessarily forever, right? Because that's the other component is
Right.
people nowadays tend to move. What is it, like every 7 years?
Yeah, the national average is every 4 to 6 years, but in the Pacific Northwest, it's closer to every 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
Is
Interesting.
Yeah, and it has to do with the affordability, and
Okay.
so a lot of people will end up trying to stay in place because that's where they've planted their roots.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
somebody that's buying their first home, they may not have any children, but if that's something they're considering, then having the bedrooms on the same floor is like something that I,
Yeah.
but, but if they have a teenager, maybe they're okay if,
These separate floors good.
so, those
Just
are
make
all
sure
the,
they're upstairs so they can't climb out the window at night.
exactly. So those are some of the questions that I might be asking that
Trying
person,
to direct your client. Yeah.
yeah, they may not be thinking about for their immediate need.
Uh-huh. That's a good point. The other question that I was wondering about, and I think we have time, are there any like home buying trends that you're watching right now, or are there any big concerns? I know like we had chatted last year, and I don't know if this is still a thing, but about condo buying, about the maintenance reports and the way that they were like allowing loans to go through or not. Like there was something coming through the pipeline because of deferred maintenance reports on condos?
Right. So it was, gosh, was it 2020? It was shortly after the pandemic. The Fannie and Freddie, which is our government institution that oversees loans, has made a requirement that condos are not allowed to have deferred maintenance. There was an incident in Florida where there had been a leaking pool that had softened the ground, and the whole building and tragically ended up collapsing. And
Right.
it really opened up the eyes to ensuring that with condo purchasing, because condos are often the entryway to home ownership for young buyers or first time buyers,
Mhm.
that although everybody likes a low monthly HOA due, sometimes it's not as advantageous in the long term, especially if they could be potentially facing a special assessment where they have a really large lump sum they have to come up with, or
Mhm.
if the whole condo community hasn't kept up on the maintenance, then that whole community may not qualify for somebody trying to get a conventional loan.
Mhm.
Most people want a conventional loan because it's the lowest interest rate.
Right, right.
So those are some of the changes that happen quickly. That's important for agents to stay on top of. Some of the trends that I actually worry about in the past, since oh gosh, since the summertime of 2022, is with the changing of the interest rates. A lot of people are deferring just the idea of home ownership, And
Mm-hmm.
I worry about it because it is the building block for their financial stability. Um, when people talk about buying a home, they often talk about growing their equity, which is a byproduct of owning a home, and it's great. But the first step of it, I think, is controlling your shelter cost. Rent always goes up. It almost rarely ever goes down. And
Mm-hmm.
if it does go down, it doesn't, it's usually, like the pandemic, it's something temporary. So I think the first thought I have about home ownership is that somebody is now able to control their housing
It's a
costs.
long-term, stable, monthly
Right.
cost. Yeah.
And then the next thing I think about is then they have a tax write-off. Typically most people will consult with their accountant and find that the interest portion of their monthly payment is a tax write-off. So
Mm-hmm.
now they're able to get lower taxes when
Mm-hmm.
they file their taxes at the end of the year. And then over time, they do build equity, and that's usually what they use to leverage going from their first home to their dream home. And
Right.
see a lot of people feeling frustrated of affordability and just kind of giving up really early. And um, I worry about that because there are so many statistics of people able to care for themselves in their older age because they were able to uh, have financial stability, build themselves a safety net, and they're able to care for themselves because
Mm-hmm.
they were able to do those things.
Yeah, and it's like yeah, like our home is it's so like obviously every single person has a home like or a place where they reside, right? And like whether you're renting or not, like it's such a center point for just doing life and being comfortable or taking care of things. I feel like for the home buying, like in the other episode where we were chatting about like when to buy a home, we kind of tossed this back and forth because we were renting, and so but we were like so discontent about renting, but it was like too much, and so we kind of had to come like swing the pendulum back and be like, okay, we are paying for a service, and this rental is meeting our needs in this time, and it's not all bad. We don't have to pay for these long-term maintenance costs. But I do think like I as you mentioned, the cost of renting, we had we watched each year, like, that we were in Seattle. We either stayed in each rental for 1 year or 18 months. And every time at the renewal of the lease, it went up at least, I think it's 10%. Like they had a county rule that like if you went more than 10%, you had to give greater than 60-day notice, or maybe it was capped at 10%. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and it changes by city. And so, like the city of Seattle will be different than maybe the city of Burien or Tacoma. Uh,
Hmm.
there are so that some cities do have rules in place, and like you said, it usually goes up, and then each time you move, there's a cost to moving, coming up
Right.
security deposits and other funds to secure the place. The cost of actually moving, um,
Yeah.
those add up as well.
For
And
sure. And the mental fatigue too. Like, okay, now I have to invest my time and my like mental energy in where I'm gonna live next. And I'm probably not gonna live there more than 18 months because that seems to be the trend line.
right. And so those are the things that I worry that people um, feel so discouraged that they don't try. So for example, I've had two buyers this year alone. Um, they were first time home buyers, so they had a special financing program, and they also were able to use down payment assistance due to their personal profile of like how much they earned in relation to the median income of a specific area. There's different rules for different cities and counties, but basically I felt so proud of those particular transactions because they could handle the monthly payment, but without those programs to help assist with the down payment to help get them into the home, uh,
Uh-huh.
they could still be renting. And
Hmm.
and I feel so proud because now they have started a trajectory. Um, and that they may not have before, but they were willing to look into all the requirements.
And
And
yeah, like the confidence building in that and the sense of stability, like it really is it's nice. Like it's a good thing.
yeah, and it's achievable. It just takes talking to somebody that knows how to guide them. You know,
Hmm.
and I think the other thing most people don't talk about is um, most people know a real estate agent of some sort, but does that agent work with clients that are of your profile? Are you a new
Mm,
buyer? Are you a buyer in this area? And then the other portion is your lender, and it's really the lender and the agent work hand in hand, and each can only control so much. So when
hmm.
cohesive team, it makes for a much smoother experience. My clients have told me that the experience is very smooth for them because they understood the expectations and the timelines um, early in the process.
Yeah.
I think if I can impart like any piece of wisdom to somebody is when they are interviewing their real estate agents, and I do think that they should interview, spend a good hour conversation before you go out and look at houses. Um, I would say, have some questions in advance and ask questions as they come up. And then think back on that experience. And did you feel like you got your questions answered in a clear way? Because
Hmm.
that communication style needs to jive with yours. And if you ask questions and you got answers at the time, but looking back, you kind of don't remember what was the answer, but you don't feel comfortable. And maybe even ask yourself if you feel comfortable re-asking the same question. Those are all things that I would want my clients to do. I want them to ask questions. I want to
Hmm.
answer it, then I want to follow up and say, does that answer it? Or, can I explain it a different way? And make sure it's really open for them to say, no, I didn't get it. And we make sure that it's answered in a way they understand. And then I want them, and I remind my clients, this is all new, and I expect that you won't remember absolutely everything. I expect that you ask the same question a few times. It's very normal. And,
Uh-huh.
and so I think that trust has really helped make a great working relationship.
That is in part why I wanted to do this episode about realtors, because I do think there is also the common practice of just using whoever your friend recommended, or like using whoever your parents said you should use, and not even like considering the fact that like this is a professional relationship, and like you hold the cards, and there's value in making sure that you're comfortable and that you're like you guys click, because like you're helping someone make a very large decision. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think communication style is important. One of the questions I ask is, do they prefer email, text, or phone call? Uh,
mhm,
and then with when I'm working with often a couple, you will have one person that has a certain personality, maybe an A type. They really want their information in a structured way, and they might want their information both written as well as verbalized. And then the other partner may not be as diligent. They may be working off of a gut feeling, and just knowing that how to communicate with each party. So for example, one of the things I tell couples is one individual may ask me a question, they might text it to me, but what I typically do is I will answer the question and copy in both partners
mhm,
so that everybody's always up to date at the
on the
same
same
time.
page. Yeah, yeah, I like that. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, and thank you for having me. I'm just so passionate about helping people, and I think the questions you ask are really important. They're often things that people don't consider.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like have the conversation. Like it's worth it. It's totally worth it when you're trying to decide on a realtor and making this important purchase. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to today's interview. I'm sure you love hearing Bill and I chat about various topics, but truly, in the heart of nuance, it is wonderful to bring on a guest and have a conversation. So I hope you enjoyed, and until next time.